So this video is going to be covering how to choose your informative speech topic. Now, when a lot of students realize that you have to actually choose your topic and I won't be dictating it, they end up here, put in informative speech topics, and end up with a list of a lot of really terrible topics. Google will not be your friend for this assignment. Instead, what I'm going to want you to do is to think a little bit to come up with your topic. Keep in mind, by the way, if you watched the earlier video, that this is actually the first part of the rhetorical canon. This is invention, right? We're coming up with your topic, and later we'll talk about how to develop your speech and research it. Now, how do you actually come up with a good topic? What you need to do is work on building on what you already know and using that as inspiration. How do you do that? Well, I'll give you an example. Let's say you are looking around. You need to open up your eyes and understand that there are good topics all around you. You just really need to understand how to use things for inspiration. So for instance, if you're sleeping and let's say you have a really weird dream, you could use that as a topic actually. So you could come up with something like the meaning of dreams and 3 common symbols in dreams. Notice here I've actually limited it to 3 common symbols because you only have 3 to 5 minutes. That's not a lot of time to do your speech on, so it's important that you really narrow and have a very specific focus on what you're going to discuss. Here's another example. I was a while ago going to a conference. I needed to fly somewhere, and this is right around the time that Malaysian airline just disappeared, right? No one knew where the airline went. We still really don't know, which is horribly scary to me, and was at the time when I had to fly. And I was wondering, if we have all this technology to track people on their cell phones, how could we lose an entire plane? So that led me to the topic of understanding current technology to track planes and investigate crashes. Another example, while I'm married, I know a lot of people, friends, students, have to deal with the drama that is Facebook when you come out publicly with your relationship. So I was wondering, how does that process change relationships, right? What's basically changed since we've kind of gone through having social media affect us? So the topic, the ways in which Facebook has changed romantic relationships. I would probably narrow this to maybe 2 or 3 ways, and notice I've focused specifically just on Facebook and romantic relationships. So again, really be specific. One last example from my personal life. So I was watching Frozen with my son for the millionth time, who is a huge Olaf fan. And I know that this was actually based on The Snow Queen, Hans Christian Andersen's book, which actually has a much, much darker take. And a lot of Disney films are actually based on, Grimm's Tales and other things that do have darker endings. But once this guy gets a hold of them, they seem to change. So I was wondering, how does Disney adapt and change famous children's tales, right? What are the changes to the endings or the characters, things like that? Now, I just showed you 4 really solid topics without using Google. So keep in mind, you can do this. What you need to do is start looking around you. Use the news, use your personal life, use things that you're interested in as inspiration for topics. Once you start thinking of topics, however, you also need to know there are some limitations. Not every topic is going to work. So until your topic meets all of these criteria, your topic is considered under construction. So first thing, it has to be new. By that, I mean something the audience hasn't already heard about. So students sometimes who are really active will want to talk about exercise or yoga or CrossFit. I have so many students that want to talk about CrossFit. I would really focus on something that we don't already know about. Or for instance, I had a student that was a vegetarian who wanted to talk about that. Now, just because I'm saying these aren't new, that doesn't mean you have to nix the topic entirely. Instead, what you need to do is get a bit more creative with how you're going to approach these areas. So instead of maybe talking about just exercise, you could talk about a particular workout or a particular kind of diet, right? So the 7-minute workout is now, research has shown that if we're more efficient in the way we work out, we can get the same results. Or maybe some sort of diet trend like the paleo diet or other things that have come out. Those could be possibilities instead of things that students already know about. Another thing, The topic has to inform. This might seem terribly obvious, but I usually have students who will come up with topics that can veer off into persuasive territory, and you want to be careful about this. So for instance, just a second ago I recommended the paleo diet. This actually could be a persuasive topic. You could give me all the information about the benefits of the diet and why it's so great. And if you do that, you're actually telling me to take part in the diet, and that's not an informative speech. So instead, you could focus on maybe the pros and cons of the diet, or research what we know or what the diet actually is. Also remember topics like abortion or the death penalty. Those are automatically persuasive. There's no point in bringing them up for an informative speech topic. Save them for the persuasive topic, or just don't do them at all because they're very overdone topics. Another thing, you have to research for this topic. There will be 3 credible sources that will be due, and I'll talk about that later on. So if you can't find research on the topic, don't do it. A lot of times I'll have students who will want to focus on, say, a hobby they know a lot about, but they really can't find a lot of research on. In that case, you can't do it. Another thing, has to be narrowed, and I emphasize this in the examples that I gave. It's really important, A, because the speech is not that long, but B, also because of what I talked about earlier, research. The more specific you are in your topic, the easier it's going to be to find research. So keep in mind that when you submit your topic to me, which is what you'll be doing at the end of this video, you have to submit a topic and not what I typically get, which is a subject. A subject is just kind of a broad area of knowledge, where a topic is much more narrow and specific and also addresses the focus on the audience. So for instance, I had a student who wanted to do nursing as her topic. That's not a topic, that's a subject, that's a huge area. I have no idea what you're going to talk about, and therefore I can't approve it because I don't know what the speech really is going to be about. When we sat down and talked about what she wanted to discuss, we came up with this: how the nursing shortage will negatively affect the medical field and patients. Notice, nursing shortage is basically the focus, and by talking about patients, I'm also showing how I'd focus on the audience. So remember, topic, not subject. Now, keep in mind there are some topics I would just say just don't do at all. I've just told you about hobbies. They're usually not researchable, so avoid those issues. Social media, I know I brought up a Facebook example, but I find a lot of times I'll have at least 5 students in one class that want to talk about social media. It always ends up being really vague and broad, and they have a hard time narrowing down the topic, so I would be very careful about using social media as a topic. And focus on things that relate to your audience. I had a student once who wanted to do a speech on adoption. That's not relevant to a college audience, so you have to be careful on that. So when you're thinking of a topic, keep in mind it has to be new, informative, researchable, narrowed, and it has to relate to the audience. Another way to think about that is you want to keep these things in mind. Your topic should be something you know about. You don't have to be an expert, of course, because that's where your research comes in, but you need to know a thing or two about your topic. If you're not a science major, taking on a really complicated scientific topic, probably not the best thing to do. But what's more important is that you pick topics that you love, right? I've had students who will go up and present a speech that they're not passionate about, and that is reflected in their performance. So please, please pick something you're interested in. But keep in mind your audience. Again, with the rhetorical triangle, it's important that you think of who is it that you're presenting to and how does it relate to them. When you hit that sweet spot, then you know you have a good topic. So keep in mind that it fits those criteria and that it's something you care about, you know about, and the audience will like. Now, if you're still having trouble thinking of topics, here are a few recommended subject areas. Remember, these are not specific topics, but sort of broad areas. ISIS, or any sort of terrorism-related issue, particularly if you're interested in international relations or politics. 3D printers are interesting. Halloween, and by that I mean like how Halloween started or the tradition, or really any holiday. We actually used to dress up for Thanksgiving, which is a interesting thing to know if you wanted that historical tidbit. Domestic violence and sexual assault. This is something that affects college students, actually very much so, and we've had a lot of controversy, whether it's with the NFL or colleges or celebrities. There's always something going on with this issue. So maybe talking about, how to notice signs of domestic violence if you have a friend that's in a relationship or you're in a relationship, signs to look out for. Private prisons. You may not remember the issue with FAU and the Geo Group. If you did, the Colbert Report did a really funny thing on it, and the John Oliver Show also did something that was funny on private prisons. And civil forfeiture. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Trust me, you will thank me later. Knowing your rights when you're stopped. So this could be something to give your audience information on what their rights are when they're dealing with the authorities. ALEC, this is another really important one, especially if you're interested in law or if you're interested in government. Cyber hacking, identity theft, top chemicals in food, technology and education. These are just some recommendations. Again, you don't have to do these. Use what you're passionate about. Now for homework, I'm going to ask you 3 questions to answer. The first one, come up with 3 topics. Remember, they have to be full sentences if they're actually going to be topics and not subjects. They can't be an exact replication of the recommended topics because those were actually really subjects. So if you pick, say, ISIS, you have to tell me what you're going to be talking about with ISIS. And they must fit within specifications listed in the lecture: narrowed, new, informative, etc. Would Alzheimer's be a good topic? Why or why not? So based on what I've talked about, what do you think? Would that work? And name one example I used to